Welcome to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. My name is Peggy Meyer. Today's guest is Jennifer Olley. Jennifer is a clinical social worker with 25 years of experience, specializing in supporting individuals with traumatic histories, including those in psychiatric and spiritual crisis. She owns and operates Self-Integrated, aligning your body, mind, and spirit, offering a holistic, integrative approach by recognizing that true alignment requires balance across all aspects of the self. Jennifer focuses on uncovering and evaluating the subtle beliefs that shape how you perceive yourself and the world, using strategies to promote neuroplasticity, which rewire the brain's response to both internal and external stimuli, incorporating body-based interventions that target the nervous system to support immune function and enhance healing. And she helps clients explore their life's purpose and connection to life force. So welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am excited for you today and to have a conversation with you. And with that, can you start by sharing just a little bit more about you, your personal journey, and how it has led to where you are today?
Sure. So, I haven't always been in private practice. I worked at the Veterans Administration for almost 20 years. I loved the work that I did. The last 10 years were in the psychiatric emergency department. And right at the onset of the pandemic, I started noticing that my body was changing. I started having symptoms that I couldn't really understand, a lot of lethargy. I felt like I kept getting the flu, but it never really went away. And as the pandemic was ramping up and we were moving into lockdown, I, of course, was in the emergency department, so I was still going into work. And just noticed that I was rapidly becoming more and more ill. And then one day in July, I noticed that I wasn't really able to finish an interview. I would go back to my office, lie down, put my legs up. I was afraid I was going to faint in session and left that day and never went back after almost 20 years. I got a acute autoimmune illness that resulted in my body not making energy. And for the next 18 months, I was bedbound, didn't leave my home,
Oh,
ordered food to be delivered, ordered a dog walker to walk my dog, minimized my phone conversations, and went into this healing journey that really, for the first half of it, devastated me, but the second half of it absolutely changed my life in ways that I never anticipated.
oh, wow. That is just, literally, I was getting chills. I don't know why, but it's just, wow, what an abrupt change.
Oh, yeah.
So let's focus, like, what happened on that second part? Just the healing process of being, oh my gosh, my body is just not producing the energy it needs. And it's like, oh, that has got to be a total shift. But I'm sure there was a lot of stuff going on in the mind about, like, I don't know, questioning things. I mean, I'd be like totally angry because I was like, a few days ago I was fine and now I'm not. Like, what is going on? Can you share just a little bit more about, like, maybe the last half of it or maybe the transition into the last half as
Sure.
good?
I mean, I think the transition is the most beautiful part because it feels like it signified the way that I lived my life up until that point, and then from that point, it changed the way I lived my life
Mhm.
forever afterwards. I've always been a very spiritual person. I grew up uh, in a very violent home. Probably had a PTSD diagnosis from childhood, always spent a lot of time focused on healing and health, started talking about and reading about quantum theory in my teens, and and then decided I'm going to become a social worker. I want to help people who are traumatized heal. So I always thought that I took very good care of myself. And as I was becoming more and more ill, and the more doctors I saw, the more doctors were saying, this is autoimmunity, there is no cure. We don't know what to tell you. Your recovery rate is about 4% if you're looking at a complete recovery. And then I met with this naturopath, and she said, it's going to take us probably 12 years to heal all of these underlying conditions that you have. She had me spend 3 grand in lab work and learn that I had so many things going on underneath. Lyme disease, 5 different other tick diseases. So she said, I think you need to file for disability. And at that point in time, I just bought my second home, but I was on my own. I was commuting from Tacoma to Seattle. I felt like I'd arrived at this place in my life, and I couldn't believe what the doctors were saying to me at all. In my gut, it just did not feel
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
But I had no idea how to heal. And here I was working in a medical system, and all of my best friends were physicians and nurses, and everybody said, "You're screwed.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can do. This is it." So for about 6 months, I just cried and just lied in bed and just thought, this is it. My life is over. I took out a third of my retirement so that I could keep my house and kind of buy some time. And I found this book from this physician in Wales who helped people heal the diagnosis I had, and it started with diet. And it looked a lot at pacing and energy. And then I took a neuroplasticity training via Zoom out of London. And slowly but surely, I started noticing themes and patterns to healing.
Mhm.
Um, the biggest takeaway for me was that all those years of healing and therapy and spirituality and um, talking about my feelings and believing in the law of attraction, I never included my body in the
Mhm.
healing process. Most importantly, I never took care of my nervous system. And what started to become clear to me was that I did not need to learn necessarily how to heal. My body knows how to heal itself. But what I needed to do was I needed to regulate my nervous system so that my immune system would turn on so that my body could heal itself in the way it knew how. And when that hit me, that was a game changer because that I could have control over, regulating my nervous system.
Mhm.
I could do qigong, I could meditate, I could
Mhm.
lie still, I could do breath work, I could do all the things that could regulate my nervous system, and then it would turn my parasympathetic nervous system on, and my immune system would kick in. And slowly but surely, I started noticing that I started gathering energy for the
Mhm.
first time in years.
Mhm.
And then within 18 months, I was in complete remission.
Nice. Oh, that's great. I heard some key things that I think, ne- maybe some massage it a little bit, just, the body can heal itself if you allow it to.
Yeah. If
And we often don't because of the stuff that we do to our bodies. Or like you said, you never included the body in the healing process. And all I'm hearing it to myself is like, we need to listen to our body. Our body knows what to do. So can you just share just a little bit more about that? Or like, what are your thoughts about that? Like, how can somebody listen to themselves? Or, like you touched a little bit on regulating the nervous system is a huge thing. I'm learning a little bit more about that lately. Just,
so the first thing I noticed was there was this very noteworthy moment in time where I surrendered to fear around how I was going to heal. And I just sat in the unknown without, my nervous system was just exhausted from
mhm,
trying to figure out how I was going to heal.
mhm, mhm,
And in retrospect, that was the beginning of
mhm,
my recovery, right? Is when I moved out of the mind. Now, it wasn't because I felt like, oh, I'm going to do this. It was because I was probably in adrenal fatigue
yeah,
and
totally exhausted, wiped
totally
out.
exhausted.
Like,
I cried so many tears in those 6 months, probably for my lifetime, really feeling like, how on earth had this happened? And I
mhm,
was just exhausted. And I just moved into this place of not knowing and allowed myself to just reside in this peace there.
mhm,
And there were days where I did it for 10 straight hours. Why? Because I was still bedbound and my body wasn't making energy. So I didn't have a lot of options, but I stopped watching true crime. I stopped listening to the news. All of those things I noticed took energy from me because my body was trying to resist them, right? And then I just started taking that money out from my retirement, really just bought me time where I didn't have to do anything. And up
yeah.
until that point, I was a type A personality. Now I call myself a recovering type A personality, trying really to be more type B, right? Where I I can allow how my body responds to something dictate the way I move through life.
Mhm.
And so that is what I started to do. I developed this relationship with my body. And the way I do it with clients now is I ask them to consider a traffic light and I ask them to consider what their heart is saying. Is it a red light, a yellow light? Is it a green light?
Mhm.
What their mind is saying. Is it a red light, a yellow light, or a green light? And what their body is saying. Is it a red light, a yellow light, or a green light? And to make all decisions coming from that place. If all three are green, I feel like it's golden and it's aligned.
Mhm.
If all three are red, those are your answers. But
Mhm.
but really kind of checking in with these different parts of me,
Mhm.
right? Like, yeah, my mind wanted to go out and garden, right? But
Mhm.
my body was saying, no, red light, you do not
Mhm.
have enough energy yet,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I started crawling out of bed
Mhm.
and deciding how to kind of move forward with life. And then when I found breath work and cold immersion, that was a game changer for me because that regulated my nervous system in a way I think 6 hours of meditation would take.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. What's the benefit or what's the big thing about regulating our nervous system? I mean, I've been hearing that a lot, and I don't know if, the listeners, I know I'm not fully wrapping my head around it, but I'm getting pieces of it. It seems kind of huge and obviously regulating our parasympathetic nervous system. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So this is how, I mean, I'm not a physician, right?
Mhm.
So I don't understand all of the intricacies, but the
Mhm.
way that I started to kind of recognize it in a very simple way is if I am in a state of stress, my nervous system is hijacked. And if
Mhm.
my nervous system is hijacked, my immune system will not turn on. My immune system will only turn on when I am in a place of peace. Because I wanted to heal, I wanted to turn my immune system on as often as possible. But what I never imagined and what was lost on me, even 20 years in a medical industry, is that physiology is physiology. It doesn't matter whether you have autoimmunity or PTSD. Both require a regulated nervous system so that the body knows how to heal itself, whether it means that my body is responding to an excess of cortisol or adrenaline or mitochondria dysfunction. It doesn't really matter. And again, I don't have to figure it out. My body knows what is top tier, what's second tier, what's third
Mhm.
tier.
Mhm.
And so, as my body physically started to heal, what I also noticed was that my mental health started to heal. And then I decided, I don't think I need to be on my medications anymore. And then I started coming off all of my pharmaceutical medications.
Mhm.
And I have remained off since then. Intuitively recognizing that although those medications were helpful for acute symptoms, I did not work with clinicians that targeted the root cause.
Mhm.
And all the practices that I developed to get out of bed all targeted the root cause, which ultimately begins and ends with a nervous system that's either regulated or not.
Yeah.
So if it's dysregulated, my immune system doesn't kick in.
Mhm.
And so it became quite simple to me,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I have agency over how much peace I feel every single day.
Mhm.
And then I started having this mantra for myself, which was every day is a spa day,
Oh.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like self-care is not a luxury, it's a necessity because we are surrounded by stress. And if we don't keep toggling that parasympathetic nervous system back on,
Mhm.
all parts of us are vulnerable,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
And if our immune system's not functioning correct, we are prone to all these different illnesses. We are,
Absolutely.
and which, I mean, 95% of what we go into the doctors for is stress related.
Right.
And so that anything causes stress to our body, which can decrease our immune functioning and it can cause our body to go into all sorts of different ways to try to cope with it. And like you said, the doctors were treating the symptoms, but not the root cause.
Yeah.
And only your body really knows what the root cause is. And if you are not listening to it,
Yeah.
you won't get the answer and you won't get the correct way to get it healed.
Right.
And so I know you mentioned a few things like breath work and cold immersion that, was very helpful to help, regulate your nervous system. That probably took what you said something that was just like 6 months of meditation wasn't going to do, or 6 hours, wasn't going to do. What are those things? Like, how can somebody, okay, breath work, it's like, okay, I breathe, like I don't have to like I automatically breathe. So why do I have to work on that?
So the beauty about so I became a certified Wim Hof instructor because it was such a game changer for my healing journey.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in brief, what intentional breath work does and what cold immersion does is they're called hormetic stressors. So in the short term, it shocks the body. So it is a sympathetic dominant shock, sympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
which releases norepinephrine, cortisol, adrenaline, but in a very short amount of time.
Hmm.
And then the response to that is this long, extended parasympathetic response. This is the way our ancestors adapted to stress.
Hmm.
So both breath work, cold immersion are simulated hormetic stressors. So we are in control. I
Hmm.
often say I choose the cold before the cold chooses me. So,
Hmm.
in other words, when I am in control of how stress impacts my life and I can target it in a short and succinct way, then the rest of my day is peaceful because I've already shocked my system. Now, that may make someone think that breath work and cold immersion are shocking. They don't have to be. In
Hmm.
fact, you can train very slowly. I have clients start with ending their shower with 30 seconds of cold water. If,
Hmm.
if if it's too cold in the dead of winter, then make it lukewarm.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes
Hmm.
to begin a self-care practice is all that matters, right? So I try to set people up for success as often as possible by starting really slow
Hmm.
and making it pleasurable. Because if it's not pleasurable, you're not going to keep doing it, right? So if somebody says, I want to do this 5 days a week, I'll say, let's start with two.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because
You
we know how
know,
that'll work.
yeah, and we do know how it works, right? When I say I want to make a change and I expect it 7 days a week and I only do it three, then I don't do it anymore
Right.
because I feel like I failed or it doesn't fit, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is all stuff that I did with myself. So I started with 2 days of full-on breath work and cold immersion, and then I gathered evidence for its efficacy,
Hmm.
right? I
Yeah.
gathered evidence for what my days were like on the days that I did it, and then I gathered evidence for what my days were like on the days that I didn't do it. And that's also what I do with my clients. I say, no, I don't want you to do it every day. Let's do them intermittently so you can gather evidence.
Hmm.
Also, when you're starting a new self-care practice, don't start three in the same day because then you don't know which ones are having an impact, right? Like you
I
want,
mean, that's kind of research, right? I
yes,
mean, it's just like, let's experiment, but let's not experiment with five different things today.
yeah,
We have to experiment with something and then go back to what we normally did and
right,
then track it.
right,
Like when you say it's like noticing what happens.
absolutely. And it isn't a quick fix. For me, I didn't, all I had was time, right? So I
Yep.
see people probably before they get to this point where they're bedbound. Thank God, because I
Yeah.
feel like I have a way to respond that I didn't know about when I
Mhm.
became ill. Hopefully I can prevent them from taking out a third of their retirement. Thank God that was there,
Yeah.
right? Thank
Yes.
God I spent 20 years contributing to that. Because that year bought me all the time I needed and it absolutely changed the course of my
Mhm.
life
Yeah.
because I do things so differently now. So, for instance, when I work with clients, I will say to them when we start getting to know each other, if I feel my body is fighting something off, I will cancel all clients that day. I will not wait until I am sick
Mhm.
to do it.
Mhm.
The minute I notice my body is something fighting off, I will reschedule appointments. And what happens is I don't get to take medication because I won't need to. My
Mhm.
body's looking for rest. I let it rest.
Mhm.
And then I technically don't get sick because I let it rest before I got sick, right? And coming out of 20 years of being in the medical industry, and I don't poo-poo the medical industry. I think it's great for acute
Mhm.
issues.
Mhm.
But when medication is putting a band-aid on symptoms that are telling the body a story, which is something is not right here.
Mhm.
When you take those medications, you don't have to listen to the body. But
Right.
if the medications weren't there, you would be dealing with, you know,
Mhm.
mental struggles, physical struggles. So I really try to let my body kind of dictate what my day is going to look like.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, of course, I'll take Advil if I have a headache and it's so bad and I have to do something, but I try to let my body dictate what
Mhm.
happens
Yeah.
and I respond accordingly. And it's a very different way of living.
Yes, but it's very, you're in control. Like,
Yeah.
and really it fights things off much sooner. I mean, once we get in tune, we will make the choices that are going to benefit us the best because we're listening to ourselves. And it's listening. I love the stoplight thing. And also, what's your head saying? What's your heart saying? What's your body saying? Because sometimes we let one of them,
Yeah.
namely the head, I think,
Yeah.
rule the whole thing, which
Right.
our brain can rationalize anything. So it'll say, oh, no, all we need is this quick fix. Let's go. Let's go. We can push through it. We can push through it. But, your body's going to say no. And then your heart's going to say, oh, there's some disconnect here. It doesn't feel right, but nobody's listening upstairs. And, I mean, it's a mess. A lot of us are a mess that way.
Mess.
But if we do, I think if we center with the heart and the body, and then, okay, mind, are you listening? They're saying no. Like we're going to have an issue here if one is going one way and one's going the other.
For sure. And the body really doesn't lie.
Yeah.
The body tells the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the simplest things, whether, you've eaten too much or if you've eaten something that it doesn't like,
Hmm.
boom, it's going to tell you various ways. I
Hmm.
think people that have allergies, they tell a lot sooner than some of us, and we probably all should have those responses because our body doesn't want it. So
Right.
don't do it.
Right.
And so we need to listen. So breath work can kind of help us get in tune with our bodies.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
The other thing about breath work for me is I feel like when I started my breath work practice, I think for the first 3 weeks I cried after every 15-minute breath work session. At that time, it was probably even only 11 minutes. And I do spend a lot of time with my clients talking about if they can't do 11 minutes a day, we have a long conversation about why can't you spend 11 minutes a day doing something? It doesn't have to be breath work. I'm not married to any self-care practice that a client chooses. I just think for my own self, the breath work and the cold immersion happen to be the biggest bang for your buck.
Hmm.
And time, with regard to time, they take less time with big payoff, big reward.
Hmm.
Um, but those first 3 weeks, I cried and a lot. And then I think since then, and that was maybe 4 years ago, since then, maybe I've cried a handful of times since.
Hmm.
It regulates the way I think. So I do not move into panic mode. It puts a long pause between stimulus and reaction. It allows me to respond and not react. It allows me to zoom out and look at my thoughts and
Hmm.
say, that's not true. Like, who does that ego think it is to be coming in there and say that? Like that is not a true thought,
Yeah.
And it's just, in some ways, it also just emotionally satiates me.
Mhm.
Like, I know on the days that I don't do breath work, I usually try to go once a week without doing breath work because I don't want to be doing self-care all the time. I would rather just drink coffee and watch YouTube. I mean, it's not like I'm not normal, like I'm normal, right?
Right.
But I know how I feel on the days that I don't do breath work.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
start ruminating by like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I'll be like, oh, I didn't do breath work. I got to do breath work. And then it goes away. Right.
Hmm.
And on the days that I do breath work and cold, it's like I feel invincible. My
Yeah.
body feels great.
Hmm.
No aches, no pains. And people use cold for different things.
Yeah.
Sometimes for chronic pain. For me, it's more around nervous system regulation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I'm still wrapping my head around some things, but is there a simple example or of breath work that you might use with your clients to try to get them to start? Because I feel like people may not know exactly how to start. Is there a
Sure. I
simple,
mean,
exercise or something?
I think box breathing is always a good
Mhm.
place to start. So breathing in at the count of four, holding for four, breathing out for the count of four, holding for four. I
Mhm.
think I think just bringing awareness to the breath is so important because I think for the most part, all of us breathe very shallow.
Yes.
So what's interesting, there's a book by James Nestor called Breath.
Mhm.
There's also a book by Patrick McEwen called The Oxygen Advantage. Both of those really start getting into the physiology around oxygen in the body. So most of us are at like a 98%
Mhm.
saturated oxygen rate. So doing breath work will easily bring it up to 100. But what's really happening is that we are offloading CO2, and that has a whole different impact on the body around nitric acid and alkalining the pH in the blood.
Mhm.
So sorry to digress, but I think so there's tons of breathwork apps out there. Wim Hof offers a YouTube beginners breathing breathwork. I do want to say you should
Mhm.
never do breathwork in a body of water, near a body of water, when you're standing, while you're driving. You should always make sure that you're lying down because you could pass out if you hyperventilate.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's a lot of myths also about the Wim Hof method breathwork, which is that it is hyperventilation, but it is such a
Mhm.
gentle breathwork practice.
Mhm.
There's also this idea that you're maximizing a breath hold, and that's actually not true. You are offloading so much carbon dioxide when you do breathing rounds that your need for oxygen, the need to take air in, goes for longer and longer periods of time. So you can actually be without oxygen for up to 2 minutes. Some people go up to 4 minutes. I don't know that that's necessary.
Mhm.
Everybody lives in their own body and they can decide for themselves. But
Mhm.
I just try to keep it quite simple.
Mhm.
So my breath work routine has changed over the years. If 11 minutes sounds like too much, start with one round.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, doing it on an empty stomach helps. It helps to not cramp.
Mhm.
But if you don't like breath work, maybe try Qigong because
Mhm.
that's like a moving meditation that utilizes breath
Mhm.
and stillness and body movement. That's
Mhm.
usually where I start when I work with clients around developing a self-care practice. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel as intense as breath work.
Mhm.
I think breath work is, historically speaking, it requires somebody to be kind of vulnerable because they're lying on their back, their belly is exposed. So I don't always start there.
Yeah.
I usually start with Qigong because I think when you look at nervous system evolution, movement helps people when they are in a frozen state. So I think
Mhm.
Qigong is a nice place to start because people get to move and practice meditation simultaneously.
Yeah.
And it totally regulates the nervous system and it incorporates breath.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, because sometimes people are a little gun shy on some things. They're not like
For sure.
totally willing to experiment something that, sounds, but if you incorporate more of your body into
Yeah.
something, maybe that would be helpful for them. So awesome. Where can listeners find out more about you and your therapy practice and other things that you're doing?
So I am right now, my website is In Spirit Remedies, but I am in the process of rebranding and calling myself now self-integrated because when I started my practice, I wanted to highlight the spiritual, but then I realized that's not really, that doesn't really resonate with what I'm offering. Yes, that's a huge part of the practice of my practice and what I focus on, which is life purpose, bringing spirit into session, what your heart is longing for. But the body is just as important. And I would say I really focus simultaneously on all three. So self-integrated is going to be the new website. If you go to In Spirit Remedies, eventually it will just funnel everybody to the self-integrated website. I also have a Wim Hof method website, so you could type in Jennifer Olley Wim Hof, it will come up, or Wim Hof Tacoma, it will come up. And I offer free consultation. I'm also opening myself up to national holistic work. So offering a holistic guide program that's 12 weeks that targets body, mind, and spirit individually and within groups. And I'm also opening it up to an international audience.
It's nice. All of those are wonderful ways to connect, and I will put links to those in the show notes so everybody can easily access those.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, this has been great, and I've learned so much, especially around regulating nervous system, which I need to dive into more of that. But as we wrap up today, is there any thought or quote that you would like to leave the listeners with?
So I think for me, I just wholeheartedly want to say that we have so much more agency over our wellness than we have ever been taught. And I think considering how easy it is to go down the Google rabbit hole of stuff, that hijacks the mind, it hijacks the nervous system. And I just really want to just remind people that the body is so intelligent. And if we can learn how to regulate the way our nervous system operates throughout the day, we have so much agency over the way our bodies heal itself.
Yes. Oh,
And
our
that's
body. Yes.
and that self-care is not a luxury.
No, every day is a spa day, right?
Every day is a
Every
spa
day is
day.
a spa day. And our
Yeah,
body would love that. I mean,
it
our
would.
body, mind, and our spirit would love that every day is a spa day because our body is so intelligent. And it can heal itself if you let it.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jennifer.
Thank you, Peggy. It was fantastic. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.